In October 1991, Van Seumeren Holland was awarded the contract to transport and erect all major heavy lifts for the Pusri 1B project in Palembang, Indonesia. The contract involved the shipment, barging, land transport and erection of 13 heavy lifts from Japan and Europe to the job site in Palembang. Just before arrival of the first heavy lift vessels, we started with the preparation of the laydown area. A heavy lift barge with land transport equipment was prepared in Singapore and mobilized to Palembang as well. On the 8th of January 1992, motor vessel Stella Prima arrived at the anchorage in the Pusri River only a few hundred meters away from the construction jetty. To get the heavy lifts ashore, we had to receive them on a flat-top heavy lift barge. The first barge trip involved 2 lighter columns, which were placed on deck of the barge and towed to the jetty for offloading by crane. The next 2 pieces were much heavier and loaded directly onto turntables on top of 2 sets of platform trailer dollies. It was dark by the time we towed the barge away from the ship. The next morning the barge was turned perpendicular to the quay and preparations were made for the roll-off operation. The barging and inland haulage to the job site was executed in close cooperation with Van Seumeren's joint venture partner Yu Chung in Singapore. To transfer the heavy lifts efficiently from the barge, it was planned to roll off with 2 columns simultaneously. The 300 tons urea reactor was slightly ahead of the 200 tons absorber column. The level of the trailers was checked with a spirit level. The urea reactor was loaded on an 8 and a 10 axle line platform trailer dolly. Slowly the transport combination rolled off from the barge safely onto the jetty. Due to the heavy current in the Pusri River, the Stella Prima had to shift to another anchorage more downstream. Accurate ballasting kept the barge level within acceptable limits. Directly after discharge of the urea reactor, the last dolly of the absorber column was rolled off. This load was placed on 2 5-axle line Cometo platform trailer dollies. To ensure stability of the 5-meter wide load, we had connected steel supports at each end of the support beams. When both units were ashore, supports were placed at the storage area to offload them and release the trailers for the next barge load. In the meantime, the barge deck was prepared with steel supports to receive the heaviest piece, the 477 metric tons ammonia converter. While one crew was offloading the first 2 heavy lifts, the barge with another crew was already on its way to the Stella Prima for the next load. To discharge this 477 tons heavy piece, the ship had fitted a so-called stabilizer in order to increase ship stability. Both 250 tons mast cranes lifted the ammonia converter from deck and maneuvered her above the steel supports and deck of the barge. While we were discharging the Stella Prima, the next heavy lift ship, Mirabella, arrived. Still another barge load after this one had to be completed, so there was a lot of pressure on the team to complete the discharge operation of the Stella Prima as soon as possible, in order to continue with the unloading operation of the next vessel. This contract was acquired in close cooperation with Jumbo Shipping, which was subcontracted by Van Seumeren for the shipment of all the heavy lifts. The heaviest piece was this 477 metric tons ammonia converter. The tallest column was one unit of 220 tons with a length of 64 meters and a diameter of 5 meters. Again, the barge was maneuvered perpendicular to the jetty. To load the 477 tons converter, we had formed a rear dolly consisting of an 8 axle line Goldhover placed next to a 10 axle line Cometto platform trailer. Slowly, this non-standard dolly was pushed on board of the barge underneath the support beams of the rear end of the converter. A 350 tons turntable combined both trailers. Under expert supervision, the converter was loaded on both dollies and prepared for the roll-off operation. It started raining again, but this didn't stop the operation. With two 5 axle line trailers coupled side by side at front and a double wide dolly at the rear, the transport combination slowly rolled off from the barge, while trim and heel of the barge were compensated with ballast pumps. The newly formed dolly, made of Cometto and Goldhover platform trailers, performed well. Again, the barge returned to the Stella Prima to load the 2 remaining columns. While the Mirabella was waiting at anchorage, the 2 remaining columns from the Stella Prima were rolled off. This operation now becomes more or less a routine operation. One after the other was rolled off and offloaded into temporary storage. The longest column, with a weight of 220 tons, measured 64 meters long and 5 meters in diameter. It was loaded on a 10 axle line Cometto platform trailer at front and an 8 axle line Goldhover trailer at the rear, both fitted with turntables. The hydraulic suspension system equally distributed the load onto the ro-ro ramp. Van Seumeren also concluded a deal with the local mechanical erection contractor Trouba Durand for a 6 months rental period to cover the use of 3 cranes and an 8 axle line Goldhover trailer. Mid-October last year, Jumbo's heavy lift ship Stella Prima took this equipment on board and delivered it on time in Palembang. A few weeks later, a 4th crane, a DMAC CC 2000, followed. This crane just had completed a contract in the Middle East. The logistics of moving large cranes and 13 heavy lifts from different ports in Europe and the Far East require detailed planning by the Van Seumeren operational department. Directly after the Stella Prima had been unloaded, the Mirabella was discharged using the same method. 1 barge trip was all that was necessary to move the remaining heavy lifts to the jetty, where they were rolled off. A smaller extra barge was used to transfer the remaining lighter columns from the Stella Prima to the jetty. In January, Jumbo's heavy lift ship Stella Nova arrived with a DMAC CC 4800 on board. Again, the heavy lift barge, with the assistance of the 140 tons DMAC CC 600, was used to transfer the huge crawler crane from the vessel to the construction jetty. The 850 tons DMAC was shipped on deck as a complete car body with both tracks assembled. Despite weighing in at 320 tons, discharge was no problem as the vessel's heavy derricks with a total capacity of 500 tons discharged the CC 4800 onto the barge. Supported by two heavy derricks, the giant crawler was slowly lowered on deck of the barge. Just after unloading the DMAC onto the barge deck, the tug pulled the barge to the nearby construction jetty. As the crane was landed with its crawler tracks parallel to the sides of the barge, it had to be turned on the barge deck to roll off sideways onto the jetty. During this operation, heel of the barge was compensated by slewing the upper car body to the opposite side. Gently, the giant machine walked over from barge to jetty within about 15 minutes. As soon as the largest part of both tracks were ashore, the upper car body was slewed again. The other DMAC CC2000 was waiting for the CC4800 to arrive on the job site so it could assist in rigging its 54-meter main boom and 42 meters fly jib. From the jetty it was only 1.5 kilometers to the job site, and the crane travelled this distance on its own tracks, with just the main boom and jib needing to be rigged. All boom sections were already moved from the jetty to the site and prepared for assembly. All 7 heavy loads were placed in intermediate storage. There they waited until the CC 4800 had been positioned and rigged on site so it could start the erection of the first shipments of heavy lifts. To perform the erection work at the Pusri job site, Van Seumeren had originally planned to send its newest crane, the DMAC PC CC 4200, to Palembang. With the amount of work on order in France, Germany and the UK, Van Seumeren decided at the last minute that it would instead buy a second-hand DMAC CC 4800 crane which was available in Russia. This 850 tons crawler crane was an ideal machine for the planned work in Palembang. In a record time of only 6 weeks, the crane was dismantled in Russia, transported by road to Van Seumeren's yard in the Seumeren, Holland, where it was overhauled and updated with the latest technology load moment limiters. Since last year, Van Seumeren bought 4 DMAC CC 4800 crawler cranes. One of them is based in Southeast Asia to perform rigging contracts in that part of the world. As far as we know, Van Seumeren is until now the only company in the world who owns and operates 4 of these large 850 tons DMAC CC 4800 crawler cranes. This project was a first time for Van Seumeren in the sense that this was the first time it had received a contract of this magnitude for the total package, from load port until delivered onto foundations. The Pusri project was awarded under extreme competition, but the newly acquired DMAC CC 4800 offered important advantages in comparison to the ringer type of cranes offered by the competition. Of a special importance was the ground loading of the CC 4800, which was far less than that of the competition, consequently resulting in less preparation work on site by the client. The main boom of the CC4800 is connected at a hinge point on the forward upper car body, and the boom thrust is through the slewing ring, which is equally distributed over both crawler tracks. With dimensions of 12 by 2 meters for each track and 60 square meters for the 4 center supports, the ground loading remains in all cases within the 15 tons per square meter, with an operational weight of the fully assembled crane of approximately 600 tons. When fully rigged, the CC4800 can walk on its own tracks from one location to another. It offers far more flexibility than, for example, a ringer, which requires a leveled and compacted area on which the ring construction can be set down. Rigged with 54 meters main boom and 42 meters jib, the CC4800 still had a lifting capacity of 313 metric tons at 20 meter radius with 260 tons superlift counterweight. This was far more than sufficient for the first series of lifts that had to be made. When rigged with main boom only and 480 tons superlift counterweight, the crane still has a rated lifting capacity of 509 metric tons at 24 meter radius. Let's go back to our job at Pusri. All lifts are based on detailed rigging studies which were prepared by the engineering department well ahead of time. Spreader beams were selected, slings and shackles fitted at main lifting lugs and tail lug. Only the transport saddles remain to be removed before the lift can be made. Slowly another 200 tons column is put into vertical position and placed on foundation. In this configuration, the CC4800 can reach 42 meters away from the crane center with this 200 tons load. In order to reach this extreme radius, the superlift counterweight needs to be connected. The Seumeren trailers and crawler cranes, backed up by a sophisticated engineering department, are an answer to your transportation and lifting needs.
Paranoid.